When a website nears completion, you think you're done, but oftentimes there are things that can be really helpful to check just before you publish your website. These can be simple things like checking to make sure that there aren't any misspelled words, which is a common issue, especially if you write things by hand, be it code or be it content that your viewer would read. But they can also be, bigger mistakes as well, like think broken links that can negatively impact the way your website functions for a visitor. As unfortunate as it is, web designers often neglect to create a set of best practices to test out their sites. So this video will offer helpful techniques for that and show you how Dreamweaver's site testing tools can help. So a quick checklist of areas that you might want to focus on to make sure that you don't have any hiccups when you do go to publish. Remember to preview your website early and often. The single best way to make sure a page looks and functions the way that you want it to is to preview it in as many different browsers as possible. So, checking in live view, as some of you may have noticed already, sometimes it looks the way you expect it to look here, sometimes it doesn't. Really, the only way for you to truly preview it properly is to preview it in a browser. Now remember, you can edit this list if you have multiple browsers installed on your computer. You can add each of them here. You can also set up a primary browser and a secondary browser using these checkboxes. To see how your layouts, CSS, and JavaScript features, you want to preview that. But for a more thorough evaluation, you should honestly preview your pages using every combination of browser and operating system you think your site's visitors may use. Now, obviously, not all of us have a Mac and a PC and a Linux machine and whatnot sitting around at home all at the same time that are ready to be used. So one website that can be really helpful for you to sort of narrow down what your visitors might be using is the Stat Counter website. This is a great place to start your research. This GS stands for the Global Statistics. So gs.statcounter.com is the URL. And this is great because it gives you an idea, sort of a bird's eye view of what browsers are popular in different countries and in different regions. And it can also give you an idea of maybe what types of devices, what screen sizes your visitors might be using. So just globally, Chrome is kicking the pants off of most other browsers. So you want to make sure that Chrome is going to be something that you test in. But Safari and Firefox are also on that list. You'll want to check each of them. If we scroll down, it gives sort of a graph, who's taking precedence. So as you can see, Chrome is light years away from the others. But you can also get additional statistics, such as screen resolution statistics. What platforms and what resolutions are being used. You can narrow it down to desktop if you aren't worried too much about mobile devices, and you can get an idea. So 1366 by 768 seems to be a pretty predominant size, and then the next one up is 1920 by 1080. And you can break it down by region as well. So if you're not worried about other countries, you're just worried about the US, and here up at the top it's going to give you that breakdown as of this month, or last month rather. So that's, a really great resource for you to reference. Not all browsers are created equal, and honestly, even not all versions of the same browser are created equal. So this can give you a little bit better of an idea on what to focus on in terms of dimensions, in terms of which browsers you need to make sure your website looks great on. It is unfortunate that you'll discover that sometimes what works for one browser and operating system may not work for another. So this is part of the reason you need to test out your designs early in the process of building your site. If you design a page that doesn't work well in a specific browser version, like Internet Explorer 8, it's better to catch and fix that problem immediately versus discover it after you've built 100 pages for a customer based on that particular design if it's not going to function in that format. Next, validate your pages. HTML and CSS errors can slip easily into your code if you edit your files with a text editor or work on pages that someone else created. Check your spelling. Amazingly, people overlook this simple step. I've graded several websites as assignments where it was a gorgeous website, but the designer couldn't spell to save their life. So it can make otherwise professional looking pages sloppy just by having poor spelling. So spelling is an easy thing. Dreamweaver has it built into it automatically. If you come up to tools, spell check's right here, and it will spell check the entire web page should you like it to, and this is going to be only on the front end, not on the back end. But if you want to spell check only a certain amount of content, highlight it, spell check, and it will only run it on that selection. Check your links. A website can be a complex and twisted collection of interconnected files. Web pages, graphics, videos, and other file types all have to work together. So if you remove or delete a file, problems can ripple through your entire website. So checking your links will definitely make sure that things are working properly. Click everything. I'll cover that momentarily. And run site reports. When you build a website, small errors will inevitably creep up into your pages. So while it's not necessarily life-threatening, forgetting to add a title to a page or an alt property to an image can diminish the quality and professionalism of a site, especially if folks with assisted reading devices on their computers are reliant upon that information. So just making sure that those are taken care of can really kind of up the ante for you. So broken links. Finding and fixing broken links is a really important aspect of designing a web page, especially if it's going to be updated continuously. So if you delete a file from your website, this can be an HTML page that's no longer functional, or a video, or even just remove an image that you think is no longer being used. If you do any of this, or move a page or a graphic outside of Dreamweaver, or simply type in an incorrect path name to a file, you might end up with a broken link and missing graphics. So Dreamweaver checks links site-wide. So under Site, Site Options, check links site-wide. This scans the entire site's files and reports back to you. So it's going to look at everything, and you can see that it's going to show me where my broken links are located. baconnavigation.css. If I click on that up here, it opens up the file, and it's telling me that the CSS file is not attached. So it gives me the opportunity. I see it here, so I don't know why it's not finding it, but it'll pull it up wherever there's a problem. So here it's showing me some additional jQuery assets. So I'll do another quick link. This little triangular button lets me check it in the current document, or I can check for the entire current local site, or check for selected files on a site. So I can kind of break it down however I need to break it down. So I've reattached this. I don't know why it's not. Oh, I know what happened. I had initially had that style sheet not in a folder, and then I moved it to a folder. So Bacon Navigation, click OK. click OK. I will check the links again. So this can kind of help you resolve problems. So just as an example, I will go ahead and move a picture outside of Dreamweaver. So I will cut this file and I'm just going to put it out here. Paste. Okay, so now that bacon icon isn't present where it normally would be. So you'll see I've got this particular broken link issue that I'm coming up with. It'll tell me where it's at. Double clicking it will open that page if it isn't already open and actually pull it out in the code, tell you exactly where it's located. And then I can go in and properly resource it. Now you'll notice some of my styles kind of altered a little bit. I'm not, worried about that at the moment, but that could be problematic for you. And I might want to place that back into the images file. This will update the link where that is being used. So that is the route you want to take. And running it again, you can see that no longer, I don't have that issue as a broken link any longer. So this is telling us what we're searching for. The little play button tells you how broad of a scope you want to look for. The entire current local site will pull up everything. But if you just want to look on a particular page, you can do that also. Now, although Dreamweaver will not verify links in this way that lead to external websites, it can list those links after you run the link checker. So to see this list, I'll click external links. This is going to be where it's linking to content outside of files that are going to be sourced locally. So this could be fonts that we downloaded from the Adobe fonts. This can be email addresses. This could be regular old URLs, video players for Vimeo or for YouTube. So if, again, we'll say that maybe we've changed our company name, or maybe a person gets married and they need to change their email address. This would be an easy way for you to go in, find every instance of that email address, and then go in and be able to correct that without having to go to each page individually and do it by hand one by one. Now there is an option here called orphaned files. Essentially, what an orphaned file represents is a file that isn't used by any of your site's pages. So, as an example, if you save an image, and I've got a bunch of images here, if I've saved an image to my site folder, but then never use it on a web page, that's going to pop up here. So it looks like I've got a few font file types that aren't getting used. I have a HTML document that isn't linked elsewhere in my web page. I've got several images. So this can be great if you want to maybe just sort of play housekeeping, and if you decide, you know what, I never did use some content, I don't need to host it anymore. This can be a great way to clean that up. This is the primary use of searching this way, is to identify old and unused files so you can get rid of them. Now, before you get spring cleaning fever and decide to delete all of your orphan files in your site, keep a couple little things in mind. One thing is, just because your site doesn't currently use a file doesn't mean you won't need it again later. So a good example, if you're working for a company and they have an employee of the month page, and one person was the employee of the month and then they switch to another person, you might not want to get rid of, Joe Smith's employee of the month page in case he becomes employee of the month again. So just because it's not currently being used doesn't mean that it's not going to get used again. And rather than having someone completely redesign the page from scratch, sometimes it can be good to kind of hang on to that. Also, Dreamweaver may flag files that your site actually needs as orphans. So as an example, some websites include what's called a splash page, like an intro page that might appear when someone enters the site, but you can't get back to it. So one of those like click here to enter type of websites. So because it doesn't relink as the home page or other areas, it's going to pop up in the orphaned file list. So even though it's nothing more than a welcome mat, you may not want to get rid of that initially. Lastly, if you write your own JavaScript, you may need to link it to graphic files and web pages. Dreamweaver doesn't keep track of the file references in your JavaScript code, so it will identify files like that as orphans. So you can kind of see there's a few JavaScript areas down here that could possibly be part of that. So just pay attention to what it is that you're deleting before you get rid of it, because sometimes your site does need those things to function properly the way that you've designed it to be set up. So changing a link site-wide. We talked about checking them, finding them, making sure they're functioning. If you need to change a link, this lets you quickly and easily change every link of a particular type across the board. So this can be if you rename a file. That's what this little guy's here. This can be, again, using that reference of the email address. It was mail to, I think it was me at bacon.com. So let's say I've changed my name. You know, we'll call Mrs. Janae at bacon.com. It will go through and find every instance of the first email address and replace it with the new one that I've typed in. So here it's telling me everywhere that that particular email address link has popped up across the entire website, not just this page. And it's going to go in and it's going to update each of those. So I'll update. And you'll look up here in my source code and it has updated my email address accordingly. So again, if you need to make a blanket fix, and a good example is someone changing their name after a marriage or something along those lines, adding a designation, anything along that direction, you can do so in one fell swoop without having to open up each page and type it in manually and individually. And again, that's under site, site options, and then change link site-wide. Now we talked about validating web pages earlier. This is essentially a tool that can kind of look at your web pages and make sure that the code is functioning properly, even if you're not maybe seeing any errors pop up in the code view. So with validation, this is partially the reason this tool works is because of the World Wide Web Consortium. This is known as the W3C. This organization is composed of representatives from universities, research institutions, corporations, and government agencies dedicated to creating standards for internet-related technologies. This, in a nutshell, means they're developing HTML5 and CSS and other web languages to make sure that websites look as consistent across all the different browsers as possible. So this way, anyone with any web browser can view a web page and still see it the way you need to. Now, there are always going to be small variations, but validating your web page can make sure that if there are any hiccups on how something might look in one particular browser or another, this can tell you. So to validate your web page, go to File, down near the bottom it says Validate, and you're going to validate the current document and pick the W3C option. So this basically sends your document to that service for validation, and it will report back if there is a problem with anything. So in this case, I'm just looking at my index page. Line 2, consider adding a language attribute to the HTML start tag to declare the language of this document. So this can just help if someone's looking for something in a particular language. This is not a big problem. This just gives you an idea of how you could optimize it further, essentially. The first column, which is this little icon here, this is going to indicate the severity of the error. If it were a big problem, it would be like a big red stop sign. The second column lists the file name, what line of code to look at, and what it is they are suggesting that you tweak. Now, in some cases, this warning can indicate that a mandatory tag like a body tag is missing, which could be a really serious problem if the HTML is going to have problems being read. I'll go ahead and validate this one too and see what happens. Okay, so this gave me a whole bunch of issues. All right, so line 42, again, I double click, it brings me there. The frame border attribute is obsolete, use CSS instead. So it's just saying this chunk of information we don't need, and I'll run it again, and it will remove it from that list. Line 43, WebKit allow full screen not allowed on element frame at this point. I'll leave that anyway just because I do want to have that there. You can see that these little guys are white. The previous one was yellow. So that, you know, these are small problems, not big ones. So it breaks it down. What specifically is what could be an issue. Some of them might be non-issues. Most of these are probably not going to affect how it appears. It's just telling you how to clean up your code if something isn't necessary. So just run the validation. If there are any problems, fix them. That's pretty much what it's for. So we've been talking a lot about how Dreamweaver writes the HTML and takes a lot of the hard work off your plate in some cases, at least the tedious stuff. But in the process of formatting text, deleting elements, and in general, building a web page, it's possible to end up with less than optimal HTML. So while Dreamweaver usually catches potentially sloppy code, you may nonetheless run across instances of empty tags, redundant tags, and nested tags in your Dreamweaver pages that aren't necessary. So it could be something like an opening and closing div with nothing in the middle of it. So things like that, empty tags, they don't serve a purpose. They're just adding unnecessary HTML to your page. And the less code you have, the faster your page loads. So we want to keep the HTML as minimal as we can. So eliminating redundant tags and things like that can help boost performance. So there is a tool that allows you to clean up your HTML. This is located under Tools, and clean up HTML is right here. So I'll click it, and you'll take a look at it, and you'll notice it's going to give you a bunch of checkboxes to kind of help organize what it is you want to change. So remove empty container tags, such as headers, divs, any of that stuff. Any redundant nested tags that will remove. Non-Dreamweaver comments. So this is a comment Dreamweaver brought in right here. If you want to remove comments that you wrote yourself, you can check that box. Dreamweaver special markup. This is going to be any special code Dreamweaver inserts into your pages. So this can be libraries, tracing images, templates, any things along those lines. Specific tags. This deletes HTML that you specify. So you would just type in the name without brackets, what you want to remove. Keep in mind, general stuff like the body tag you don't want to remove because that will get rid of all your content. And then additional options, combine nested font tags when possible. This will take multiple font properties and put them in a single tag. And I want to see what it does once it's done, so I'll click OK. And apparently this page was good. There wasn't anything to clean up, so we're in good shape there. So that's very helpful. If you clean up, this is a great way to have nice lean code, but if you forget about it till after you build a bunch of pages on your site, one thing to keep in mind is that the cleanup HTML option, you can only do one page at a time. Fortunately, Dreamweaver has developed another option that lets you do a site report. So clicking on site and going to reports will get you there. This makes identifying problems throughout an entire website and not page by page a snap. It locates problems that the cleanup HTML command can fix, but it also checks your pages for other problems like missing titles, empty alt properties for image, and other issues that can make your site less welcoming for web surfers. So I'll go ahead and click report. It's going to give me a breakdown of what I can mess with. So workflow, because we're not working collaboratively with another person, these are all done by yourself. You don't need to worry about that folder. But nested font tags, missing alt tags, untitled documents, I can see that's going to pop up right here. I would go ahead and just check all of these, honestly. It's just going to let me know what's going on there. Ask me to save. I have it set to go on the current document, but you can do the entire site or specific files or a specific folder. So it gives you quite the breakdown. There we go. So it looks like lots of untitled documents, which is an issue. And then a missing alt attribute on the media queries page. So there's my media queries page, line 37, missing alt attribute for my picture. Or actually it might be 37 is for the div, so missing, oh, my div doesn't need an alt attribute, so I think that was for the picture. So there's what we've got. So again, for the whole site, these aren't big problems, but this can really help. There's quite a few of you that still have issues with leaving untitled documents, so this can be really helpful to just check yourself and make sure you haven't forgotten anything, especially if you've got a lot of pages to keep track of. So those are just a few tools to help you test your site, make sure that you're ready to go. It can really help speed up the process for you versus trying to read all of this stuff by, line by line and hope you haven't skipped anything. So this can kind of just act as a backup to make sure nothing important gets missed.